Hello and welcome to the DSR Daily. I'm David Rothkopf, joined by Riley Fessler and Minna Stein. It's the middle of the week, so we're going to offer you our middle of the week report. Riley, what do you got?
In response to the shooting of two National Guard troops by an Afghan national, the Trump administration has paused all immigration applications for citizens of 19 countries previously designated as high risk. The policy directive halts the processing of benefits, such as green cards and naturalizations, for individuals from nations subject to earlier travel bans or restrictions, regardless of when they arrived in the U.S. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services announced it will conduct comprehensive reviews and potential re-interviews of immigrants from these countries who entered the United States on or after January 20th, 2021. While the agency cites national security concerns for prioritizing these reviews within 90 days, critics have characterized the sweeping measures as collective punishment.
Yeah, because it's collective punishment, right? A guy, by the way, who was thoroughly vetted many times over, worked with the U.S. government, committed a horrible act, and all of a sudden everybody is being punished for it. It's a little bit like the shoe bomber, and then we spend the next 20 years taking our shoes off before we get on airplanes, except it's worse than that. Because, of course, the act isn't being responded to disproportionately. It's being responded to in order to satisfy a nativist, racist impulse to keep brown people out of the United States. It has several negative effects, one of which is bad for America. Our diversity is our strength. It's bad for our businesses. It's also bad for, us and our military in places where we want to work with people, like Afghanistan and Iraq and other countries where we needed to collaborate with them, because it makes it harder for people to get in. Nobody trusts us. I'm old enough to remember that this was the first thing the Trump administration tried to do the last time Trump was president. I'm also old enough to remember something the president probably doesn't remember, which is yesterday, because he slept through his cabinet meeting, if you missed that. And one of the things that he did while he was snoozing, or before he was snoozing, or while he was sleeping, or whatever he does, was he went into a long rant about how horrible Somalis are, and that we don't want them in our country. And of course, anybody who lives in communities where there are a lot of Somalis knows how much they've contributed to the United States. He attacks on a regular basis Ilhan Omar, a member of Congress, who is 100 times the patriot that he is and has done more for this country as a true public servant than he has as a grifter. But it's just all part of the ironic commitment of the Trump administration to actually turn the United States into the world's leading shithole country. Okay, that's a little hard, heavy for starting off on a Wednesday morning. I'm sure Minna has something to cheer us up.
Cheer-ish.
Yeah.
Cheer adjacent.
Yeah.
Matt Van Epps won Tennessee's special election for the deep red 7th Congressional District, defeating the Democrat despite an unusually competitive and expensive race. While Van Epps held the seat for the GOP, Democrats significantly narrowed their Republican margin compared to 2024, viewing the overperformance as a promising sign ahead of the 2026 midterms. The race drew heavy national involvement and millions in super PAC spending, with Van Epps running on MAGA-aligned themes and the Democrat campaigning with prominent Democratic figures.
Yeah, I get it. They narrowed the margin, and all sorts of Republicans are going, oh my God, if they narrow the margin like that, or the shift is like that in every election this year, we're going to have, the Democrats are going to have 300 seats in the next Congress. Well, from their lips to God's ears. But having said that, I had to turn off Blue Sky last night or log off of Blue Sky, because all I was getting was, sort of people wanting to hand out participation trophies for the Democrats and rationalizing. And it was like a mom saying to her kid, well, you lost the game badly, son, but, or you lost the game badly, honey, but, guess what? There'll be another game. It was just so much rationalization. The reality is, what matters is winning. Narrowing the margin is great, but there is still at least one place in the United States where the majority of people think the Trump administration and the MAGA GOP needs to keep doing what they're doing, which, leads me back to, one of my old hobby horses, which is I really think we need to look into ensuring that everybody in the United States has access to the internet. Because if you have access to the friggin' internet, you're not going to vote for more of what we're getting, right? Okay, maybe it's not that. But, it's still a loss. And I'm sorry, but, there was a reason my family called me Eeyore as a child growing up. And that is, call me when we win. Riley?
The Department of Homeland Security has launched a law enforcement operation in New Orleans as part of the Trump administration's ongoing city-to-city immigration crackdown. While officials stated the operation specifically targets violent criminals released after arrest for serious offenses like rape and armed robbery, the full scope of the enforcement remains unclear. This action marks New Orleans as the latest Democratic-led city to face surged federal resources following similar and controversial operations in Los Angeles, Chicago, and Washington, D.C. Furthermore, President Trump announced during a cabinet meeting that National Guard troops would also be deployed to the city within a few weeks to support the efforts.
The other thing he announced during the cabinet meeting was this. It was something watching him yesterday, as his cabinet is saying some of the most ridiculous stuff you ever heard. I mean, Kristi Noem, did you hear this? Kristi Noem thanked him for there being no hurricanes this year. I mean, it was like, say what? Say, he's in charge of the weather now? And Lee Zeldin said, you took a bullet for America. We should all be grateful that you took a bullet for America. I mean, seriously, Kim Jong-un would have gotten up and left the room because it was too embarrassing. But Trump didn't get up. And the reason he didn't get up, particularly if you saw the Marco Rubio remarks when he was also polishing the president's undercarriage, as I like to put it, was, Rubio's like sitting there next to Trump, trying to win brownie points with saying all sorts of over-the-top compliments, and Trump is eyes closed, slumped forward, asleep, and it's just, fine. Look, I'd rather the guy be asleep. I'd rather the guy slept 24 hours a day. They do the less damage. And of course, the reason he was asleep is twofold. One, he's old and declining and collapsing as a human being. But the other reason is that he spent the entire prior night up doing weird social media, reboosts and statements and all sorts of craziness on his Truth Social site in the middle of the night. Ranting, essentially. He's just like ranting. He is literally, as I often analogize, King Lear out on the heath shouting at the heavens. That's what his social media site is. Anyway, here we are sending more troops into more cities, and it's normal. It's like, oh, today it's New Orleans. Yesterday it was Chicago. Then there was Portland. Then there was L.A. We're going to send troops. That we should be sending troops into cities. It's a bad use of our military resources. It costs billions of dollars. The troops don't do policing. They don't actually achieve anything. They're sent to punish democratic cities. This is craziness. But it's like, oh, yeah, it's Wednesday.
Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins warned that the Trump administration...
She was great at this meeting. I don't know if you saw her, but she was just, like, praise Jesus, we're going to starve the kids. It was like, what the heck? So that there is something that they find a way to sound like they're in a church, and following the some kind of higher doctrine as they impose suffering. and pain on more and more people. That's what you were going to say, right, Minna? Sorry to
That is
interrupt.
exactly what I was going to say.
I mean, you can finish. I didn't mean to
All right.
interrupt you.
Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins warned that the Trump administration will begin cutting off federal SNAP administrative funds to Democratic-led states that refuse to share program data, accusing them of blocking efforts to combat fraud. States like California, New York, and Minnesota dispute the administration's claims, with critics arguing the move is a politically motivated attempt to undermine food stamp programs that serve millions of vulnerable Americans. While Rollins alleged, quote, rampant fraud, USDA data shows that the vast majority of SNAP benefits are used appropriately, with only a small fraction of retailers penalized for violations.
Yeah. There's a structure that we use here because you guys are trying to be responsible, which is they did something. Critics say that it's wrong. What we mean by critics is sane people, people who believe in science, people who believe in facts, people who believe in reality, people who know what day it is, people who know how to read. Okay. And, there have been study after study after study. There is no fraud here. Fraud is one of those terms that is used by them with regard to social programs in order to provide an excuse for cutting back on the social programs, which they then do without justification, and it becomes very hard to restore those programs. Meanwhile, these are not programs, right? These are not abstract things that are being discussed in a political science class or written about on the front page of a newspaper. They are, mommy went to the store today and she couldn't get any food, so you kids are going to be hungry at lunchtime today, or you're going to be hungry at dinner time, or you're going to go to bed hungry because the government of the United States has decided that it is going to penalize children because they live in democratically controlled cities and because they don't like the kind of people who need this in those cities, who are often people of color. Now, there are a lot of people who use these programs in red states, and they are not cracking down on those programs for that reason in the same way. Why? Why make one group of people suffer and not the other? Could it be racism? Could it be political prejudice? Could it be both? I vote C, both. Riley?
Russian President Vladimir Putin held a marathon 5-hour meeting with U.S. envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner to negotiate potential peace terms for the war in Ukraine. Although Kremlin officials described the discussions regarding the U.S. peace proposals as constructive and substantive, the parties did not reach any specific compromises or agree on final wording. Putin expressed a mixed reaction to the presented documents, signaling that while some provisions were acceptable, others, particularly those involving territory, were rejected. As negotiations continue without a set summit date, Ukrainian President Zelensky has emphasized the need for strong security guarantees to prevent future aggression, while disputing Russian claims of recent battlefield victories.
I mean, look, we're sitting there sending the president's closest advisor to go and talk to a guy who illegally invaded a country many years ago, and who has illegally claimed land, and who is illegally responsible for the deaths of thousands of people and the destruction of billions in property and the kidnapping of tens of thousands of children. And we're trying to say, well, what do you want? What kind of deal can we offer you? And, it's clear, because we've seen it in the past couple of weeks, that the U.S. takes Russian plans and goes back to the Ukrainians with them and considers that negotiation. I think it was telling that at yesterday's negotiation, Jared Kushner was sitting at the side of Witkoff, and the Russians had with them a foreign policy advisor to the president of Russia, but also an economic advisor. And a lot of this has to do clearly with deals that are being cut that will benefit not the United States. Trust me, that's not the way it's going to be. It's going to be people and companies that are close to Trump. And if the deal's sweet enough, then we'll try to put more and more pressure on the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians have shown a lot of resolve thus far, but they can't do this entirely on their own. It's going to depend a lot on how strong the EU is in backing up the Ukrainians, even if the United States is willing to continue to try to sell them out. Right now, this process is not encouraging. And then again, of course, we have, as we have discussed often in the past, the problem that every deal that the Russians have signed in the past, they have broken. So, it's a bit of a problem when you are dealing with a country that doesn't honor the agreements it signs. Anyway, we've seen that elsewhere. How many hundreds of people are dead in Gaza in this ceasefire that we struck? Israelis have killed in the past week children again because the children approached the so-called yellow line in Gaza. And we say, hey, that's a ceasefire. We made that ceasefire. It doesn't feel like a ceasefire if you're being shot at, if you don't have a home, etc., etc. In any event, that's it for us today, Wednesday. We've got more podcasts. We did a great Soul Consciousness podcast yesterday. We did a great Need to Know podcast conversation with Senator Jeff Merkley about the onset of authoritarianism in the U.S., plus several headlines. We've got our DSR Daily coming later today. We've got Words Matter coming later today. There's lots for you. Listen, enjoy, like it when you're on a social media site, subscribe when you're on YouTube or when you're following us at the DSR Network or your favorite platform for podcasts. And if you want to support what we're doing, by all means, go to the DSRnetwork.com, click on membership for a few bucks a month. You can support what we're doing, or you can go to Substack, the Need to Know under my name, David Rothkopf, and you can subscribe there. Support us. It helps us to continue doing what we're doing, and we're grateful when you do. Riley, thank you very much. And Minna, thank you very much. And we'll be back with more real soon. Bye-bye.